Luke Hobbs, and Deckard Shaw.
We've got unfinished business.
Shaw's sister took something from me. A virus that could wipe out half of the population, and I want it back.
You want to tell me just what we're dealing with here?
It's my sister. Family business.
When it's the fate of the world, it becomes...
Hey everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog podcast. This is your host, Elias Rauch. This podcast is sponsored by EliasRauchMedia.com. Today we are discussing Fast and the Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw. Ever since hulking lawman Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who plays Hobbs, a loyal agent of America's diplomatic secret service, and lawless outcast Shaw, played by Jason Statham, a former British military elite operative who first faced off in 2015's Furious 7. Since then, the duo have swapped smack talk and body blows as they try to take each other down. But when the genetically enhanced anarchist Brixton, played by Idris Elba, gains control of an insidious biothreat that can alter humanity forever. And best, a brilliant and fearless rogue MI6 agent, the Crown's Vanessa Kirby, who just happens to be Shaw's sister. These two sworn enemies will have to partner up and bring down the only guy who may be badder than themselves. This podcast is sponsored by EliasRauchMedia.com. We are talking about Hobbs and Shaw, directed by David Leitch, who is, I want to say, a director and stuntman. Originally, he was a stuntman, director / producer, pretty much everything on John Wick. He was actually uncredited on the film with Chad Stahelski. But more recently, you've probably seen him on the movie Atomic Blonde as the director, and Deadpool 2 as the director. He's also got Undying Love, The Division, and Enter the Dragon in the Bruce Lee remake. Those are also in development. I'm kind of interested to see that one, actually. So, Hobbs and Shaw is the 9th installment, I believe, in the Fast and the Furious franchise. It has currently a 67% on Rotten Tomatoes, 7.2 on IMDb out of 10. And overall, it is pretty much exactly what you see on the marketing. The marketing features the dynamic duo of kind of this like buddy cop mix up with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Jason Statham. And so this is supposed to kind of have this crazy action thrill drive that the majority of the Fast and Furious have, especially since they've injected the series with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I think it's only gotten better. It's definitely taken the genre of just like, I believe the original Fast and the Furious was loosely based off of like a Point Break remix kind of on it, except for if they were doing the originally in the original Point Break, they were trying to bust these guys for doing robberies and stuff like that. In the original Fast and Furious, they were trying to bust them for like DVDs, like boosting DVDs and stuff like that. And there was some decent action, in the first Fast and the Furious. I believe that was back in like 2000 or 2001 or something like that. And that also had Vin Diesel and Paul Walker, a different set of quote unquote characters and family. So they had a different flavor back then, and obviously a much smaller budget. I bet the budget on the original Fast and Furious is next to nothing compared to this $200 million budget we had on Hobbs and Shaw. Let me just see what we originally started out with. And Okay, so they originally started out with 38 million. So in comparison, this has only gotten bigger and I don't want to say badder, but just like, just more fucking explosions, I guess. And it definitely feels like Hobbs and Shaw is the natural occurrence of reinventing the brand. I mean, there's only so many times that you can have these guys doing heist with cars that can be interesting, and they've pretty much exhausted just about every way you can do it. And so, Hobbs and Shaw is somewhat of a spin-off of the original Fast and the Furious storylines. And so the Hobbs and Shaw movie definitely feels like you want to have seen the previous Fast and the Furious movies to kind of get a glimpse into who these characters are and why you should kind of care about them, because they definitely touch on who these characters are in this film, but honestly, I didn't ever latch on to them emotionally. I thought the writing in this was all action based, all action oriented, quips and stuff like that, and occasional there was this comedy duo back and forth, they would kind of make fun of each other and stuff like that. But other than that, I wasn't latched on to these characters, because the majority of the time it felt very paint by the numbers of the things that they were going to say. So a couple of the lines did feel improv or something like that, and the charisma that comes off of the chemistry that comes off of the screen between The Rock and Statham is it's great, but it can only be carried so far, because there's just so much action that you can handle that only makes sense, and this, that, and the other. And given this movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes, I don't think it needs to be that long at all. I think they easily could have shaved 30 minutes off, mostly because the whole last act feels kind of tacked on. Let's see, anything else that we want to discuss in the spoiler-free section? I'm trying to wrap these up kind of Fast and Furious style, you know what I'm saying? The rest of the cast, Vanessa Kirby, I thought she did okay for what she was given. The chemistry between her and her love interest did not work, in my opinion. Just it very forced and tacked on. The rest of the cast I really don't want to touch on until we get into the spoiler section, with the exception of Idris Elba. He's always great in everything that you see him in. The only problem with that character is that he feels kind of one note, and the characters all around feel very flat, and it's, the stakes in this movie feel minuscule, if that makes sense. So one thing that I did like about this movie that was standing out to me personally was the cinematography. This is the cinematographer of this is Jonathan Sela, who was also known for being the cinematographer on Deadpool 2, which I kind of noticed that some of the shots and stuff like that had some of the same color and texture. The sound in this, real quick, sounds almost like they took, the soundboard off of Transformers 1 or something like that. It's almost like they are trying to enter the Transformers era of Fast and Furious. And I believe this is Fast and Furious is a Universal property, and the other one is a Paramount property, Transformers is, so that would take some serious negotiating to get that through. But I wonder if there was a way that they actually did use some of those sounds with licensing agreements. So this was the same cinematographer as Atomic Blonde. I know it kind of has that 80s retro feel a little bit. I don't really feel like this had that 80s retro feel. It felt more futuristic, but 80s can sometimes feel like that in a way. He was a cinematographer on John Wick as well. He's also done tons of cinematography for music videos as well, like Miley Cyrus Wrecking Ball, Shawn Mendes and My Blood, Beyonce, Dance for You, some Britney Spears, some Katy Perry, and yeah, he's done a ton of stuff for all over the media board. So let's see what else we got. Anything else we want to talk about? The characters, the prices, the main individuals. Let's see. I know I had some notes somewhere around this part. Here we go. There's some cameos that happen within the movie. Some better than others. Some that might have happened in previous Fast and the Furious movies that I don't remember off the top of my head. I want to say that I watched the first 7, and then the 8th was the one with Charlize Theron or something like that. And that was the one I did not get to see, and I guess that kind of left us off here. But it's definitely, from what I heard, gone way more on the science fiction side of things. So I think we're about ready for a spoiler section here. Alright, well, thank you for listening, and let's hop into the spoiler section. So we're in the spoiler section for Hobbs and Shaw. And like I said earlier, this commercial pretty much shows you exactly what you're going to get. I mean, if you've seen the commercial, you've basically seen the movie. I think the commercial kind of ruins it for the going back home with the Rock kind of stuff. I was a little bit, I was kind of pissed when I originally saw the trailer, which is why I sort of try to stay away from trailers. I was like, why did y'all show that in the trailer that they're going to go back to, Hawaii? So that was a little bit irritating. So that it was not like blowing me away that was happening. A couple other things I had in my notes. Let's just talk about the cameos. Helen Mirren is, I think, Jason Statham's mother. I don't know if she was in the other Fast and the Furious movies, so it's kind of hard for me to say whether it was appropriate for her to be in there. It felt like she was just kind of a walk-on for one scene, and it's just like, whoa, it's Helen Mirren for Helen Mirren's sake. And I guess she gives a little bit of exposition of, why Statham's the way he is, but it's not really enough to keep it in there, in my opinion. The music, that was not the soundtrack. I kind of dug the soundtrack. I thought the soundtrack actually was way more appropriate than not. It kind of it was fun in a way, is what I would say. I didn't mean to rhyme. But the score felt kind of wacky in a way. It almost felt like they were 2 steps away from doing the Seinfeld, ding 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 ding. It just felt like it was too goofy in a way. Listen for the transitions between scenes. Sometimes it felt like they were like almost doing the thing. So the writing, yeah, it's not fantastic. It's kind of heavy and laid on thick in a way. The best writing I feel like that happens within the movie is literally the conversations of them bickering back and forth, Hobbs and Shaw, but there's not really an overarching growth to it. It's not like, because I didn't see the first couple, I guess it was the 8th movie where they had to do this really big action scene, or I've only seen parts of it. That was the only thing that really worked, but there was no progression in their character that made it necessary. So it almost feels, why were y'all bickering like that in the first place? It's like, they were almost acting unprofessional, is what I would say. The stakes in this, I would say the action's pretty much off the wall. Like it's straight up superhero shit now. It's blocking bullets with our hands. flying down, what's it called, skyscrapers, and still, still getting off, a wire or a rope without a scratch. It's just, there's no stakes, and it feels like they don't feel pain. They get in fights with tons of guys, bullets flying everywhere. There's no stakes, and so there's a point in the movie. I think some people will say it's the halfway point that says, yeah, halfway through this movie they pretty much say, yeah, we don't give a shit about physics, and we don't give a shit about pretty much the majority of the characters, and we'll put them through all types of shit that make it look like they're just rag dolls. And so there's majority of the time you're just watching them, punch or drive. And so if you're just going for that, then I think you'll enjoy the movie. But other than that, it's like it just got so repetitive in a way that it was just like I'm starting to bore. And so by the end of the second act, late in the second act, I was like, wow, I thought this was going to end by now. So there's like one or too many acts, in my opinion, and they probably could have saved a little bit of money by not doing that. I don't see the reason why they did the whole thing go back to Hawaii or something like that. I guess, have the family ties or something. It's I just had mixed feelings about it all through it, just because it didn't really tie into anything, and there's obviously no message in my opinion, except for maybe one scene that I'll get to it. I'm about to talk about it. Talking about them trying to spin the news. So I did say that they're trying to channel their inner Transformers. I mean, even things such as that motorcycle is a straight up Transformer. It's literally one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I actually had myself looking up like bikes after that. I was like, damn, I gotta get something like that. That's just so sick. The deep kind of computer bad guy antagonist voice straight up is ridiculous. Like, I don't even know what we're doing with that. Like, that's straight up 1990s goofiness. I don't even think I have the actor that plays that. Could have been anybody, but it was that shit straight up goofy, and that kind of lowered the bar for me. It's like, all right, we're gonna have this overarching villain who we're not gonna get to see. Recently in a lot of movies, I've noticed that there's been a lot of themes ending in news spinning and stuff like that, and shifting the narrative on how the movie actually ends in a way, or starts to end, or in the third act the antagonist is trying to spin a story to make it look like our heroes are the bad guy. I don't know if it's because I'm podcasting about it and I'm starting to notice it more, or if it's more or less about just the culture we're living in, the political climate, the news, that type of stuff. It's just that kind of environment. I don't really know. I can't really speak to it at this point, but it's something I have noticed, especially this year, about the antagonist making the good guys look like they're the culprits. Let me check my notes real quick. The handy-dandy notebook. Okay, so the age gap between Shaw's sister, Vanessa Kirby, and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and them trying to push this really terrible, awkward, romantic subplot was so forced. Like, oh my gosh. It was being shoved so hard, and I was just like, please make this stop. This is just, it's not working. I don't know, it's not necessarily the age range, but she's just, well, okay, so, let me see. there's about, let me see, 19, I see, 1988, 19, there's a 16-year age gap between Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Vanessa Kirby as Hattie. And this weird subplot was just so forced, and they were definitely trying to use it as a crutch for the comedy. But I mean, literally, these are grown ass people. It's like they can make their own decisions and that shit, and it's just like, Rock is 47 years old, and Vanessa Kirby's, every bit of 30, so it's just like, I don't understand what the point is in even making this a thing. I don't know. It was driving me up the wall. Now I'm just starting to ramble about it. But that was a subplot that did not work for me. I'd say the biggest problem for me with this movie is the fact that we have two straight men in this movie. Normally in comedies we have a straight guy and then like the goofy guy, and so they kind of balance each other off so that it lets off the steam. But there was literally scenes in this movie where they had the characters get exactly the same treatment. Now, when I say that, I mean, like, it would be like Idris Elba, like, saying, "I'm Black Superman, I'm about to punch you both," and he, like, literally punches The Rock in slow motion, which, by the way, the action slow-mo was really dope. It was a little excessive, but also really dope. Mixed feelings on it. Idris Elba would punch The Rock in slow motion, and The Rock would be like, and then Idris Elba would turn around and punch Shaw in slow motion, and Shaw would be like, brr. And so it was to a point where it became excessive, where there was no differentiating the characters to make it interesting at all. They literally would pull the gun out at the same time, say the same thing. It was to the point where it wasn't even funny. It's just like, all right, now this is just annoying. It's just like, all right, why don't you just either y'all make out, kiss up, get out of here. Just whatever this bromance is going on, it's not as interesting as y'all think it is. And strictly to me, if you want a dumb action movie, I think you found one right here. I think it's G.I. Joe meets Bond meets the Terminator, which they name checked that at one point, all combined together with a big dose of stupidness. It just feels like a big sugary drink, and so it just feels all hyped up, and there's a lot packed into it. So I've got mixed feelings about the movie overall. The action has me in a way that I'll say, yeah, I might watch it again in the back, like while I'm playing video games or something like that. And I definitely don't think I'm going to turn this on to just watch the entire thing again. So that's where I'm leaning towards. I think the charisma of the characters of The Rock and Jason Statham brings the movie, gives it as much steam as you possibly would think it would have, but they can only do so much with what's given. So the action's great, the characters are trying their best, the actors are trying their best, and Jason Statham's sister as well, Vanessa Kirby, is also excellent in it. One of the cameos I really liked was Kevin Hart. I thought him just randomly popping up was hilarious, and he was kind of like the little steam valve release that we needed of comedy every time Hobbs and Shaw would just get really close and they were about to beat somebody up or something, even the cross editing, it was clever, but it was also excessive. So, like, I mean, at the beginning we see them waking up and having their whole routine, but later when they're having a fight, it's just cross editing between them both beating guys up, and it just becomes like excessive. And yeah, I don't know. I just wish they kind of would get more on a professional level page, and I don't know. I don't know if they necessarily needed the romantic subplot of Vanessa Kirby, because it kind of feels like she gets short end of the stick because she just doesn't have as much speaking lines or anything like that. So I do have some gripes with it. There are some pros. It's kind of in the middle tier of the Fast and Furious, probably closer to the, the lower half of the ones that have been released, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as like something like Too Fast, Too Furious. I thought that's probably not as fun as this. So I appreciate listening to the LuckyDog podcast. Check out all the other podcasts we have coming down the tube. So rate, share, subscribe, LuckyDogPodcast@gmail.com. And we have Twitch, we have Facebook groups, we have the Instagrams, we got it all. Check it out. Thank you. And take it easy.
Tell me this is not happening.